If you're in email marketing, you know that over the past few years, and especially over the past few months, deliverability has gotten even more and more important than it was before. It's become more and more strict. It's harder to play in this playground, but today we're going to cover the 7 proven steps to double your email deliverability score. Now, that sounds like a big promise. How could I say that? Because we've done it before and we're doing it today. Today we're going to go through a few examples. We're going to go step by step all the things that we do for accounts that come into Transparent Digital and make sure that we are as rock solid on the deliverability front as possible. So first and foremost, let's go through how we can say this. Just a few examples from some of the brands we've been able to help with deliverability. Some of these brands have come to us with IP and domain reputations of low, and we've over time, and I mean it can take weeks, months, sometimes several months to fix depending on the severity, but we've been able to do this time and time again, and we've kind of developed an internal framework for how we do this step by step. So you can see this brand had an issue with bot signups, so we were getting a ton of flow recipients and absolutely atrocious flow metrics. So after we did a few things, and at this point we hadn't fully solved it. We didn't fully solve it until March or April of this year, but you could see that in February, and between January and February, the metrics turned around. I mean, it was a full 360 at this point. And you can also see once we removed, turned on double opt-in, did a few things to remove some of these bots, created some flow filters inside of flows, the just dramatic drop in total flow recipients and the absolute boost up. And when we look at revenue, we're generating less revenue here than we were from, I don't do public math, but 20, 30 times, whatever the delta is between 32,000 and 2,000. We're generating more revenue from this setup than this setup, which is just amazing. When we come down here, there are two other, there's a few apps that we do use to look at deliverability, but one of the apps we use is Glock apps. So when we look at the spam testing tool Glock apps, we can see this brand's score came in at 59 on onboarding, and the latest testing was 94. And another brand that we work with that we use all the steps we go through today on this brand over the past few months, we've been able to get them on a deliverability score of 100, which is almost unheard of. Now let's go through all of the steps to double our deliverability score. There's going to be 7 steps total. Let's jump right into them. Let's start with 2 of the lowest hanging fruit, the ones that most people know about, but maybe aren't doing correctly. So let's start off with set up and validate authentication records. For the people that don't know, let's run through a quick kind of explanation of what these are in layman's terms, just to get an idea of what they are, how they work, and build our contextual roadmap of what these do and how we use them. So SPF, Sender Policy Framework. If we think about our email as a letter, the Sender Policy Framework is the list of approved addresses that are allowed to send letters on your behalf. If the letter is from an address not listed, it's considered fake. So it's basically all of the domains or addresses that are allowed to send emails on our behalf. Think about if we have Gorgeous, a support platform that sends emails on our behalf. If Shopify sends emails on our behalf, they all have to be approved and authenticated. So this is what, and we would update our SPF record accordingly. This is the SPF record. The DMARC record, or domain-based message authentication, reporting, and conformance, say that 5 times fast, is like the return address on the envelope. It tells the recipients if the letter is from a trusted source. With DMARC, there are policy records. Policy records are none, quarantine, or reject. The goal is to move our policy record, as you can see here, down from none all the way over to reject. Now, word of warning, do not move your policy record from none to quarantine to reject automatically. You have to do a few steps in between to make sure we're compliant. Otherwise, we'll have worse deliverability than before. So a word of warning there, but DMARC is really, really, really important. The last is DKIM, or Domain Keys Identified Mail. Think of this as a digital seal on the letter. It proves the letter wasn't tampered with during delivery. This is kind of the, all of these records together act as the big thumbs up, the big green flag to let mailbox providers like Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, let them know that we are authentic. They act as a green card. They act as a passport to let the authorities, quote unquote, mailboxes know that we've done all the appropriate things to identify ourselves and gone through appropriate steps to say, hey, we deserve to be here. So just kind of a quick breakdown of some of the main authentication records. Now there's also BIMI. We're not going to go through that today. We're going to stick to the core 3. The next step here is to use a platform. So there are some steps based off of your domain registrar, whether you use Namecheap, Cloudflare, Google domains, or now Squarespace domains. There are a few different processes in how you install some of these records, from SPF to DMARC to DKIM, so I won't go through those today. If you want a separate video on that, let me know and I can make a video going through how to install these on certain domain registrars. But once these are installed, you can find these online, you can reach out to your domain registrar, but once these are installed, you want to use a platform like EasyDMARC or DMARCian for real-time updates on your authentication records, or in Google Postmaster Tools, there's also a drop-down for authentication. So inside of Google Postmaster Tools, select the domain. There are drop-downs for IP, domain, reputation, and inside of there is also authentication. So you'll be able to see if it's triggering inside of there or not. Here you can see 2 different domains. This domain has the DMARC policy set up, but the policy, has the DMARC record set up, but the policy is none. There's an issue with the SPF record. It's installed, but there are issues. Likely there's a large volume of emails being sent through an unauthenticated domain, and DKIM isn't set up at all, versus this brand where DMARC is installed and the record is set to reject, the policy is set to reject. SPF is installed properly, DKIM is installed properly. This is what we want to avoid. This is what we want to achieve. Now this is inside of EasyDMARC, but any of these platforms will work. Let's move on to double opt-in. This has been a point of contention. This is something that clients, I think, will always fight back on. We had a brand, actually it's the brand down below, where they were getting a list bombed and a huge amount of emails from RussianEmails.ru emails, and we had to figure out how to remove these people. Now there wasn't a clear source for these people, so we had to figure out, okay, well, what's the next step? The next step, because all of these emails were bouncing, welcome flow email number 1 had an 18% bounce rate. The only next step was to turn on double opt-in. Now, again, this will always be a point of contention. Most people fight against this. This has been kind of public fodder that this is not what you want to do. You want to have this turned off by default, and you do. But if there are issues with deliverability, turning this on is one of the quickest ways to start seeing improvements, especially if you see a lot of bounces and a lot of people marking as spam. Just huge low-hanging fruit. Now, what I would recommend turning this on, there's a few steps. Turn on double opt-in, set a follow-up for 14 and 30 days. Inside of these checkups, once you set these follow-ups and you check back up on the account 14 and 30 days later, watch total email revenue versus previous period and previous year. So you want to look at revenue as a whole. Sometimes we could see a dip in some revenue, but it could just be attribution, but we want to look at revenue as a whole because that's what's most important. The next layer down is to watch recipients and revenue of welcome flow versus previous period and previous year. So in a brand that we did this with, we saw a 69% drop in email signups, a 60% drop in total recipients for the welcome flow. This is a huge drop, and we also saw a correlating drop in revenue. So we had to have the discussion to figure out if it was worth it for us. We turned it back on, and we're currently going through that to see, are we still experiencing a similar issue? But these are all things that you want to keep an eye out for, because if there is a drop in revenue, you want to be able to explain why and do a cost benefit analysis on, is this really worth doing for us? So you want to watch the recipients and revenue there. A bonus here is if a client is really apprehensive to this, one thing you can do is set up a separate list for some of the other sources. So let's say you have a large number of people coming from Shopify. When you look at your deliverability, when you look at the people bouncing and marking you as spam, a lot of them are from Shopify, but not all. One thing you could do to mitigate some of the majority is to create a separate list and tie that to the Shopify WooCommerce integration and turn double opt-in on there, but off on your main list. So that's another option you have. You have some flexibility here, and you can do this for basically any source that you want. So if you have a separate pop-up, or if there's some list where you're doing some co-marketing or a giveaway, you can turn double opt-in on and off for these separate lists. This is just low-hanging fruit and something that 100% should be touched on. All right, let's dive into design for deliverability. This is been a debated topic amongst agencies in terms of what is the best way, text to image, image only, Klaviyo templates. There's been a lot of discussion around this topic, but we found there's a few things that we can look at, control, adjust beyond just is it image only. Below, we're going to show you what we do for some emails and something we've been testing a lot lately, but there's more to it than just image only text blocks. First and foremost, the first two are going to be around links in your emails. The first three. Links in your emails. Controlling the total number of links between your header and your footer and the body. And if there are over 40 links in your email, that is too many links. That's completely unnecessary. And drilling down, even testing, sending an email that has just one single link versus that email could be a worthwhile test. Usually we recommend testing it across multiple different emails to get stat sig, but this is one thing we found that can affect a lot of things and potentially even affect what tab you end up in Gmail. Promotions, social, primary. The second is the number of unique links. If you have 25 different links, or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 of the same link, this is not as clear but could also provide some benefit in terms of controlling the total amount of unique links in an individual email. Make sure, number 3 is make sure not to link to any domains except for the one on your Klaviyo account. This is also hit or miss. This doesn't always trigger the spam filter or trigger any hits on domain or IP reputation, but I sent with a 8-figure brand that we worked with earlier this year. There was an email sent to TikTok to promote their TikTok shop, and it drastically dropped their IP reputation in just 3 email sends across 5 days. It can do a lot of damage, but it's not always the case. So something to be aware of, something to look out for if you're going to do this and the client's requesting it, and this is what we want to do as a brand, then go along with it, see what the result is. But that is one thing to keep an eye out for, is sending to domains that are not your domain. And there's certain cases like maybe you have an Instagram link in your footer. Again, it's not always perfect, but something to look out for, something to keep an eye out for. Make sure you're using alt text. So this is something that I still see people not doing, and it's insane. If you're not using alt text at this point, I don't know what you're doing. I really don't. Alt text is some of the lowest hanging fruit in terms of accessibility. Google, Gmail, Yahoo, they cannot read our images. So this is as close to a translation as we can give them to what our images are about. If we continue to send emails with no alt text, we'll continue to land in spam. It's not as simple as sending an email with no alt text lands you in spam, but over time it starts to, there's an algorithm that understands maybe you're not as trustworthy as some other senders. So you really want to make sure that you are using alt text. It doesn't have to be long, really complicated alt text. It just needs to be a description of the image. But using alt text is at this point just kind of table stakes. It's something you need to be doing. Make sure your images are as light as possible, whether this means changing the size of the emails that you create inside of whatever platform, inside of Figma, inside of Canva, inside of Photoshop, wherever you create emails, making the dimensions smaller, so when you export them they're a little bit smaller, or if they're a little bit bigger, or even if they are a little bit smaller, still compressing them, exporting them in PNG, making sure that they're lossless, and compressing them to make sure they are as light as possible without losing any sort of quality. Making sure that they are as light as possible is huge. If you have this giant 4,000 by 1,000 image, it's going to take up so much weight. It's going to take a long time to load, especially if you don't have good reception. That's one thing we have to consider. Oftentimes when we're testing these emails, we are inside of a place with good reception, with Wi-Fi. You have to make sure that we are thinking about the lowest common denominator, and if someone is in a place where they don't have good reception, it won't load. So making, kind of designing your emails and making them as light as possible, and designing them for the lowest common denominator is really, really important. make sure your emails are as short as possible. This is if you're having deliverability issues. We found that when we're having deliverability issues, either sending plain text emails, making the emails really, really short, really sweet and to the point, we find that really long, heavy emails is kind of just like icing on the cake. If we're already having deliverability issues, we don't also want to be sending these huge, enormous emails. It's just there's no benefit there. Lastly is adding in text blocks. So if you're having deliverability issues and you're sending all image emails, or even if you're not having deliverability issues and you just want to test this because it's been kind of public discussion and you want to try and test one-to-one, what makes the biggest difference? You can see one thing that we do is we design our emails we design them around dark mode. So you can see the text would be built out inside of Klaviyo, and we would just export these images so everything would be as clean as possible. You can see we do the same thing here. We just design them as PNGs, and we're able to design them for dark mode in a way that doesn't look terrible and hideous and ugly. So that's one thing that we started doing, is incorporating some text blocks into our emails, and we're finding ways to create designs that work around text blocks as well. But just starting the process, testing it out, it's becoming more and more important to learn how to design for 2024, 2025, and beyond, and stay ahead of mailbox providers and their algorithms like Gmail and Yahoo. So that's one thing that we have started doing as well. All right, now let's move on to the next, which is clean your list. So this one's really simple. Cleaning your list. Most people don't have a process for this. Most people aren't doing this as often as they should. But implement a sunsetting implement a sunsetting flow. Implement a sunsetting flow if there isn't one already. That will just tag people after a certain period of time. It can be different for every brand, but usually it's 120 to 180 days. That'll tag the people who make it through that flow without engaging with any of those emails, tagging those people, and routinely, whether that's once a quarter, whatever frequency you decide on, suppressing that list of people, because if they have been inactive through all of your campaign sends, through all of your automations, through the sunsetting flow, and they still haven't engaged, the chances that they'll ever engage are zero. And if anything, taking this list, putting them into a custom audience, using them for Facebook and Google, and trying to get those people back to your site to have them re-sign up. Maybe they used an old email, whatever the case is, you want to remove these people from your list with a certain frequency. The next thing you can do, if you don't want to wait for that period of time, is run your current list through a list verification platform like Zero Bounce or Kickbox. Below you can see Kickbox. We ran a new client's list through Kickbox, and we saw that there was actually a surprising amount of it was just under 1,000 that were not deliverable, or risky or not deliverable or unknown, that were just not healthy, good, sendable emails. So removing those, that's a certain percentage of the list that we're able to remove and avoid any risks to deliverability, to IP and domain reputation, by just running it through this platform. And what you could potentially do is export anyone who is not deliverable and try to send them a list. I wouldn't recommend it though, because these platforms are usually really, really good with determining who is a real email. I would just trust the platforms, remove these emails, and move forward with the clean list. So this one's pretty simple. It's really just which platform you're going to use, deciding on a certain frequency for cleaning your list in terms of creating a sunsetting flow. Maybe you send a sunsetting campaign with your sunsetting segment, so that way you can implement this a little bit quicker, but a few options for list cleaning. Next is segment your audience. Now, these are where we're getting into kind of basic territory, things that you should know, but things that you may not be doing, may not be looking at. Always opt for engaged segments. This brand was they had a brick and mortar location, so they had some theoretical constraints around who they could and could not send to. This was an agency that we were consulting with, and they went to, with some optimizations, optimizations that we gave them, we worked on together. They went to the client and said, hey, we don't think this is the best strategy, here's why. When we look at the segment they were sending to, it was not the best segment in terms of total engagement. We can see out of this segment, a large portion of these people were just not engaged. The open rate was significantly lower, the click rate was significantly lower, the average order value was, I think, over half, or just about half. When we looked at their engaged segment, we can see that, granted there being issues with machine opens, etc., but we can see that their open rate was an order of magnitude higher, their click rate was an order of magnitude higher, and their average order value was $704 compared to the previous $389. List size being about the same. So always try to opt for your engaged segments and use exclusions when you need to, say, remove certain people from those lists. Next is optimize your segmentation. So when we looked at some engaged segmentation they had set up, it was all around opens. Now this, at this point, most people know this. We have to conform to the changes that are happening on platform. We can no longer just depend on open rates. Kind of feels basic at this point, but it's just a reality that not everyone knows. So we have to optimize our segments for looking at obviously open and click, but also looking a layer deeper. There's new filters inside of Klaviyo that obviously look at machine opens and Apple privacy opens, but also can look at bot clicks as well. So if you go into your segmentation and look at has clicked email over once, click the filter, there's a bot click filter that you're able to filter. All of these things are things that you're able to test. You know, you can create segments with or without these, stack them inside of a campaign, and look at the audience breakdown afterwards and see, is there a delta in any of the metrics in terms of open, click, place order rates, total revenue. Optimizing your segmentation is becoming more and more important. And the third point we just talked about is layering in other segments. And also, you know, if there's a brick and mortar segment that needs to be hit, or a brick and mortar list that needs to be hit, then layering that in with our engaged list, so that way we at least have some bolstering. So if our click-through rate for our engaged segment is 6.78%, and for our unengaged segment is 0.21, or let's say for this segment was 2.1, we're able to get somewhere in the middle versus having some of these lower metrics here. And granted, these accounts are also seeing some inflated click rates, but you get the point, and you can see that we're able to meet somewhere in the middle if we stack some of these segments and utilize exclusions, which is our next point here. Utilizing exclusions is something that I do not see done enough, and I cannot stress the importance of using exclusions inside of our campaigns. Going through just some of the popular and most common exclusions, bounced emails. Klaviyo doesn't consider an email a hard bounce until 7 soft bounces. Now that's a lot of bounces before we consider someone suppressed off of the list. So bounced emails, there could be a variety of different ways you consider this. Looking at your account is going to be the best way to do this, but looking at if someone's bounced more than twice in the last 24 hours, in the last 7 days, in the last 30 days, has bounced 3, 4, 5 times overall time. Some things to consider there, but bounced emails is one. Also looking at excluding machine opens or Apple privacy opens. We initially, when this happened, use this filter on all of our segments, and we saw a drastic drop in performance for brands that were, in revenue for brands that were heavily iOS. This does not control who we're able to send to. It only says if this person opened with this constraint, meaning that Apple privacy open was triggered with this profile, exclude them from this send. The hard part is we can't see if that person actually opened or not. It just triggered the mail privacy protection. So using this exclusion to see, does it make a measurable difference if this person has opened an email with this setting, exclude them, and does it make a difference in our campaign revenue? Next is unengaged users. The way that we kind of have these conditions set up is if the person has received an email a certain amount of times and has taken no action, whether that's open, clicked, placed order, viewed product, active on site. If this person has received a certain amount of emails and still not engaged, we want to remove them from certain sends. Anyone who's left a negative review, refunded or canceled an order, someone who's received too many emails, say 2, 3, 4, 5 emails in the last 24 hours, last 3 days, certain mailboxes. If we find that inside of Klaviyo, our emails are performing really bad on Outlook or Hotmail or Yahoo, then we want to temporarily exclude some of these inboxes from our sends just until we're able to improve our deliverability on those platforms or on those mailboxes. Next is active subscribers. This can be different for different brands. If a brand wants to, is very product focused, but wants to exclude anyone who's currently an active subscriber, this is another common one. And anyone who's purchased over the last 7 days. If someone's purchased in the last 7 days, the chances of them buying again are relatively low. Again, this is going to depend on your brand, but relatively low. And most of the time, they will still be in your post-purchase flow or a replenishment flow. Let that do its job. We want to exclude these people. All right, we have made it. The last step we have here is more of a monitoring step, but it's watch IP and domain reputation. You can find this if you go to postmaster.google.com. If you're not already set up with Google Postmaster, it's not already installed, then you can just install the records to your DNS settings. It's super easy. Depending on your ownership status, you may be able to get verified immediately based off of your domain being used in your email to sign up. But go to postmaster.google.com, install the records to your DNS settings, and start sending and set a recurring follow-up to look at domain reputation, IP reputation, spam rates, authentication. There's so many different settings that are really, really valuable in here. Go through, look at these on a consistent basis. We do this in our bi-weekly check-ins for client accounts. We go in and look at these just to make sure that we're on a healthy trajectory. This is an account that came to us recently that had god-awful domain and IP reputation, and we're able to help them start to bolster up IP reputation. We're still in the process of working on our domain reputation, but it's always a work in progress. We've been able to make some pretty fast results. We're looking to improve, but this is the data that you get to see when you have tools like Postmaster Tools installed. Guys, that is a wrap on the 7 proven steps to double your email deliverability score. If you found this helpful, drop a like down below. If you want to see more videos like this where we go really in depth into some of the best ways to improve your deliverability, to improve your email marketing results, subscribe down below, and I'll catch you on the next video.